Hello and welcome to the discussion on the Conductor on the Underground Railroad. So I hope you enjoyed reading the biography piece by Anne Petrie. So just to recap, a biography is a true account of a person's life that is told by someone other than the subject. So it's somebody else wrote about the person. So, for example, if someone wanted to write a biography on my life, it wouldn't be written by me, it would be written by another person. An autobiography is what is written by the actual person, and an autobiography spans the whole life of someone, just as a biography spans the whole life of someone. So what you read was not everything from Harriet Tubman's whole life, it was an excerpt, so meaning a piece of a larger work. So you just got to read a little bit about it. Not the entire piece. A memoir is written by a person, and it is just little memories from that person's life. So it's not their whole life story. A memoir is written by that person, and it's just little pieces. So again, a biography is written by somebody else, and it tells you about that person's entire life from beginning and end. An autobiography is written by the person, and it tells you their whole life. And a memoir are just memories of that person's life written by the person. So we read part of the biography of Harriet Tubman, written by Anne Petrie. So in the beginning, we see that Harriet Tubman is referred to as Moses, and we learn that she is a figure of mystery to the oppressors of the enslaved. So they don't know what is happening to the people they're oppressing and trying to keep enslaved, and so there's this mysterious figure they start to name as Moses, which has biblical allusions, right? Biblical references. And we learned that Harriet Tubman announces her arrival outside the enslaved people's homes by singing the spiritual Go Down Moses. So I'm going to play Go Down Moses. It's a spiritual. Some of you may know it. But just so you can hear what the enslaved people would hear outside their quarters when it was time to get ready to leave and prepare for departure. So you can continue listening to that song. You can just do a search online and you can find Go Down Moses, the full spiritual song. So we learned that Harriet Tubman spends a lot of time planning the trip she's going to make, and she puts a lot of planning and effort into what she's doing because it is very dangerous. She knows the consequences are death if she gets caught. So she waits for a clear Saturday night and makes the call out like a whippoorwill or a hoot owl to signal it's time for departure. So when she first arrives in the area, she sings Go Down Moses, and that spreads across, right? And that's kind of the signal to the enslaved people that, okay, she's in the area. And then when it's time to leave that night, she makes a whippoorwill or a hoot owl call, and that lets them know it's time to go. Now is the time. And so she waits to a clear Saturday night because when we're reading, we find out that the oppressors cannot make a claim that the enslaved people are missing until Monday. So that gives Harriet a whole day advantage of being ahead of the people who are going to come and try to hurt them and force them back. So I'm going to play real quick what a whippoorwill sounds like so you can have that reference. Right? Or she makes the sound of a whippoorwill or a hoot owl. So again, they would hear these sounds and they would know now's the time to act. So these actions of Harriet, the planning, right? Spending all this time waiting for a clear Saturday night to have that extra day head start, that shows us characteristics of how Harriet Tubman was as a person. We've learned that she's careful, she's organized, and due to the extreme nature of danger of what she's doing, she's extremely brave. So we see this particular trip being described that she's trying to liberate 11 enslaved people. She knows if they are caught, the enslaved people will be whipped and tortured and sent back to the South, and she knows that she will be killed by being hanged. So she knows that it's dangerous. We read of Harriet going to the first stop on her route and being turned away because the house was searched previously. So we learn that even though there are these stops she has planned and set up along the Underground Railroad, that sometimes it didn't always work out that way because people would go in and search the houses and scare the people who were willing to help the enslaved people escape and get towards liberation. So we see that in this part that the one house refuses the enslaved people, and so we learn that Harriet has to try to instill courage in the people because they were walking for 3 days, they didn't have food, they were tired, and she promised them at this house they were going to have food, and she says, you know, we have to keep going, we have to keep pushing. So we see her try to motivate people, trying to get them to safety. Then we see them pushing forward and going to meet Thomas Garrett, and Harriet Tubman describes him as a Quaker. She tells them that, you know, he's a little different. So Quakers were people that had certain religious belief mindset, and she describes him as kind, generous, and doing God's work. There are 3 references to Thomas doing God's work. And so if you know anything about Quakers and their religion, that makes sense. And we also see these references to Moses. So there's a lot of allusions within this text to Bible scriptures in the Bible. And an allusion is just a literary term that means referencing. So we know that Thomas, at his underground stop, he's a shoe salesman, he has a shoe business, and he hides the enslaved people behind a wall of shoes that really opens, and it's a door, so it's like the secret door. And so after they leave, after being fed and being warm at Thomas's house by him and his wife, she notices as they continue moving forward that the people are starting to get irritable, right? And she tries to tell them stories to uplift their spirits. She tells them the story of Frederick Douglass, and she's trying, but she can see that she's starting to lose some of them because they're tired and hungry and cold. And then one enslaved man states that, I just want to turn around, I want to go back. And at this point, we see Harriet pull out a gun and point it at the man. And we might think that might be kind of scary and not maybe the best thing to do, but she explains that if you go back, he would endanger the lives of everyone in that group. They would be hunted down. The people who have stops on the Underground Railroad, you would endanger all of their lives. So that act of turning back could possibly kill 11 at least people, if not more, because the people who have those stops will be given up and they would be killed too. So she says to him, we got to go free or die. Freedom's not bought with dust. And I want you to sit and think about, what does that mean? Freedom's not bought with dust. What is she saying about how you earn freedom? So the guy obviously just continues with the group. And then Harriet starts to tell them the story of the Middle Passage on slave ships. And she does this on purpose to kind of bring everything full circle for the enslaved people trying to get liberation. She says that your ancestors suffered these slave ships in this torturous agony, and your liberation is going to be difficult, just as their experiences were really difficult, but it's worth it. And so it might not be easy, but it's worth this trip. And so after that story, we see a shift in the group dynamics, in that they now start to trust Harriet completely. And then we see that the group makes it to William Still's house. And this is an interesting part of the biography because the author now includes a primary source to validate her biography. And that's important because, Harriet Tubman didn't write this, right? This was written by another person. And so the author is trying to say, look, I know what I'm doing. I got my facts right because I used primary sources to write this biography. And a primary source is a document or any other material that was produced by people who witnessed or took part in the historical events. And so we see that William Still keeps track of his experiences with the Underground Railroad. In 1872, he published the record in his book, and he called it the Underground Railroad. And we see he took records of who went and stopped at his location, where they were from, to document their existence and to show that this really happened. So a primary source are actual documents from someone who lived during that time that produced it. Pictures can be primary sources. Diaries are primary sources. So we learned that Still gives Harriet money to continue the trip. We learned that Harriet feels like, okay, we're in a little bit better area now. We're out of Maryland. Maryland was one of the hardest parts to get through, but she still knows there's many dangers and obstacles ahead. We also learned that Harriet Tubman would stop at Frederick Douglass's house as a place along the Underground Railroad, and we have an excerpt from Frederick Douglass's autobiography, which would be another primary source, confirming that. So again, the author is saying, I didn't just make this up. I looked at sources, I read the sources, and I wrote this after reviewing all the research I've done. We learned that when they get to Canada, it took a month to get there. Harriet rented a small house and invited the enslaved people to stay with her, and they worked hard, and it was cold and it was hard work, but they came to love some of the places in Canada. And so through all of this, we can analyze the biography to figure out what Harriet Tubman might have been like as a person. And so to do that, you have to look at what the author says about Harriet Tubman's hopes, her thoughts, and her worries, what Harriet Tubman's actions are, what she says and does, and think about how others treated Harriet. And so basically we learn through all of this that Harriet Tubman was hardworking, she was generous, she was extremely strong, she was brave, encouraging. There's so many times throughout this biography that we read about Harriet encouraging the enslaved people to get them to liberation, and just telling stories and trying to keep them motivated. We learn she was fiercely independent, and so she is this historical figure that is brought to life through the telling of her biography. So that in a nutshell is what we take away from this little biography excerpt. Remember, it's not the full one, and if you want to read the full biography of Harriet Tubman by Ann Petrie, I encourage you to look it up and possibly read the entire piece on your own. So I just encourage you right now to work on writing a 6-word memoir that describes Harriet Tubman. And so, a memoir is just something you can put. A 6-word memoir is something that shows us who the person is in only 6 words. So I created one that says, Harriet, a warrior woman, a savior. So to me, those 6 words can express who Harriet Tubman is as a person. So I encourage you to do that and continue on with your lesson.